Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the podcast. We
Woo,
got
yeah.
Mr. Marvo on the other end. We're going to talk some old school wrestling, big calls here. Got the bling, the Intercontinental Championship. And my man there got the Ultimate Warriors version of the Intercontinental title, and I'm kind of jealous of that. How's
Act-
Mr. Marvo doing?
Actually, it's the Mr. Perfect version.
Is it?
Yep,
Oh, yeah. He did
this
wear
is
that.
the Mr.
So
Perfect version.
why was his a different color though? I never understood why his was. I understood the Warrior because of the face paint and all that, but I didn't know Mr. Perfect did that.
Perfect did it because I think because white just equals as bad as I'm about to say this. White
Uh-huh.
equals perfection.
You know what? I hate to say it, but you're right. You know, I mean, well, let's
And they
talk
they
about.
they had actually took this color out for a
Uh,
long time, but
uh,
Cody Rhodes, the
right.
American Dream, Dusty Rhodes' youngest son, bought this
Uh,
color back when he won it.
oh, did he?
Yep.
Okay. Now, see, you're up on the new school stuff. I'm kind of like spotty on the new school stuff. So today, let's get into how did we get started in this. So first, with you, what drew you to wrestling? How old were you when you started remembering some of the matches? And just get some detail.
I was 5 when I first started watching. So
Right?
24 years ago was the first time I ever laid eyes on wrestling.
Okay.
And it was because of my grandmother. She had a love and fascination for Bruno Sammartino. That was her dude.
Uh huh.
At the time when I started watching, Bob Backlund was the world champion.
There you go.
And I'll never forget watching the fluidity of his matches.
Right.
I could not believe how he could just flow through the matches the way he could and exchange holds the way he could. And he would be beaten down and you just knew that he was going to lose.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow he would pull out a win. And I do believe that was Vince McMahon Sr.'s version of Hulk Hogan.
There you go. All right. So basically, was he your first hero, or would you say there was other wrestlers that kind of influenced your take? And your grandmother was a lovely person, by the way. I loved her a lot. So go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Um, no, my first hero, honestly, and I hate to admit this because he was a good guy at the time and didn't want to like him, but I was a red and yellow Hulkamaniac.
Oh, really? So
I
really,
I, I
kind of
love I love Hogan for some reason. I
okay.
love the people that he fought, but I loved Hogan. I would his music come on, I do the cut to the ears, the poses, all of that. And
Right.
even now, when his music comes on, that nostalgia in me
Uh huh.
will still do it. I have my 11-year-old daughter knows how to do the Hulk Hogan poses.
He's 11 now. Oh my goodness. Okay.
Oh, she'll be 12 August 1st. But
All right. Theo,
and she wants to get into wrestling.
do she? Okay. As a wrestler, or just like watching it?
No, she wants to become the first female version of The Rock.
Okay.
Use
That's
wrestling and then get into acting.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they won't kill wrestling off before she gets a chance to do it. But but I'll get into my origin of wrestling. Pretty much the same thing. Um, but my dad was the biggest influence on wrestling. I think he loved wrestling more than either of us did growing up. And he used to wrestle me and my brother, and he used to just F with us all the time, doing putting holds on us, slamming us and all of that. And he loved all of the baby faces. Every baby face there was, they were all right with him. He hated heels, you know, before we really knew what a heel and all of that was, you
Right.
know. And he loved, of course, Bruno Sammartino. I don't think he was a big Backlund fan though. because I think he was more like on Dusty Roads, and he kind of like Mid-South. I'm trying to think. It was somebody else that he really gravitated towards too. He liked Bobo Brazil, and he was kind of on his way out at that point, because you're talking about like the mid-70s and all, and he was on his way out of wrestling at that point, I believe. And he really dug wrestling on that end of the scale. Used to watch all of the shows. It was like some of the shows that you don't even think came on, because in the DC area, which we're from, ladies and gentlemen, even though I'm in Florida there, it's like we will watch every program. I remember Southwest Championship Wrestling used to come on, and I think Tully's dad, Tully Blanchard's father, Joe Blanchard, had owned that.
He was the promoter. He was the promoter down there.
And it was weird because I saw a babyface interview from Tully Blanchard, and it just seemed weird.
Wow.
They're babyface for a little bit. And I think he became a heel in that territory. But he was a babyface for a little bit there. And I think it might have been Dick Slater or somebody he was going against. It was weird, but he's a very underrated wrestler. I'm not going to get into that part of it yet, but my dad just loved all of the baby faces, and that's how we grew into it. And then my mom, now this was pre-Jehovah Witness, she was a Catholic, and basically one of her friends was deep into wrestling. So my mom actually took me to my first, wrestling match, at the Capitol Center. I don't know what the hell they call it now. I don't even know if
it doesn't even exist anymore.
So is it like a parking lot there, or what was there?
It's actually the newest hospital in PG County.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay. So,
anyhow, we need healthcare.
Come to Florida, you got a hospital in every corner and every sort of doctor's office you can think of. All these old people, including myself, that's down here. But anyhow, Backlund was wrestling Bob Orton. That was the first wrestling match that I remember. Bob Orton dominated like 20 minutes of that match. Everybody started yelling, Bobby, Bobby, Bobby. And then, Backlund got his second wind. And then, of course, he came back and won the match and so forth. I was never into the baby faces stuff. I think what happened was I got to a point where I was like, that just sounds like some pure D trash. I'm going to do it for you. You guys are with me in the ring and all this other stuff. And I think baby faces back then, not all of them, but a lot of them, I didn't think they did promos with.
They didn't. They did. And that's one of the reasons I actually did my 12th grade English paper on why wrestling heels should get more respect than wrestling's baby faces.
Get out of here.
I explained it in the sense of the heels tell you they're going to go out there and they're going to kick your ass.
Right.
The baby faces go out there and say what they want to do, but they don't do it.
True.
The heels back up what they say.
Yeah, exactly.
And the biggest thing to me was, and see, I didn't know about the NWA until around maybe 1984. Remember the old TVs that had the top knob and the bottom knob?
Yeah.
The bottom knob caught NWA Friday nights at like 10 o'clock on channel 54 and 56.
The UHF channels.
The UHF channels.
Yeah.
And I got exposed to the Four Horsemen.
Right.
Once I got exposed to Rick, Arn, Tully, and Ole. And I still want that shirt that Ole had that said, "Damn, I am good."
But you know what? I think you can actually make that shirt. I mean, because
it looked like it was made then. It looked like it was a homemade thing.
I mean, matter of fact, I think that was part of the downfall with Crockett Promotions was the fact they didn't make money off of advertising. But you know, we're not going to get into that quite yet or whatever. So, was everything WWF for you, or did you start?
It was everything WWF up until that point.
Right.
Once I saw the NWA, I had a whole different outlook on wrestling.
Okay.
I had a complete, and so did my grandmother, because there was one incident that happened with Dusty and the Horsemen. And she legitimately, and I've never seen her do this, first, curse at the screen, and second, yell, call the police.
Call the police.
Followed this man into a parking lot, tied him to a truck, and beat him with a baseball bat.
Yeah, we all remember that incident.
And I'm sitting there laughing. She's like, this is not funny. In my head, I'm like, yes, it is. This is hilarious. This is absolutely hilarious. You got a 3-on-1, and Tully was on a crutch. Yeah. You got 3-on-1, and this man is tied to a truck, and you just broke his hand with a baseball bat. That was perfect. That was perfect. From that day forth, if no other day, that was the day that the black heart that I have now was formed. I became a heel. No. There are certain baby faces that I still might cheer for, because no matter what, they are that damn good. So I got to cheer for them to a point. I can't be mad if they win or lose. But man, and then we finally got, I remember when we finally got wrestling 5 days a week on Channel 50.
I know.
You had a different federation every day.
Yeah.
Including that god-awful Glow wrestling. But I was glued. I was glued to the TV every day at 6 p.m. to see what was going to happen.
Well, see, the thing of it is, and I'm going to give viewers a little bit of context here. DC is one of those transitional markets. I mean, obviously, it's in between New York, it's in between Midwest, as in terms of market, not proximity, obviously. So a lot of wrestling markets, from Florida Championship Wrestling to Jim Crockett Promotions to World Class, Mid-South, AWA, all of them had TV markets in the Washington, D.C. area, basically the entire time that I was there and so forth.
Yep. World Class was smart too, because they not only had national, they had international.
Exactly. I mean, because they did have some Japanese promotions there too. I mean, but they didn't come on during the week. That was the weekend. And a lot of times it'd be like, you know how they used to have the infomercial times, like 2 a.m. or something like that.
Yeah.
That's when you would get to see the Japanese stuff. If you just so happen to be up and it's like, oh, wrestling's on it. Then it was like, well, hold on, I never saw this. And then you had, you know, Giant Baba, you had
Antonio Inoki.
Yeah, exactly. All of them would be on. And, you know, their style to me was just different because of the crowd. Because it's like that Japanese market to me is like, you seeing these guys beating the hell out of each other, and it's like people are waiting to cheer or you know.
Quiet.
I try to insult anybody in the market or whatever. But we Americans, man, we got to have action and reaction, and we got to be part of that flow and so forth, you know? So, all right, but before the Four Horsemen now, before you got into Crockett Promotions or whatever, what did you ever get into AWA, like Nick Bockwinkel, Vern Gagne?
AWA I got into because of Bobby the Brain Heenan and his mouth.
Yeah.
That man could talk an Eskimo into buying ice and a polar bear. That's how good he was. There's a reason why they call that man the genius.
Yeah.
He could rile you up so much. And another one my grandmother could not stand. And I started realizing that everybody that she didn't like, I end up gravitating to.
Interesting.
I would end up liking them, like, okay. You don't like Bobby Heenan and Nick Bockwinkel. You don't like Larry Hennon. Interesting. Interesting. You want to root for Baron von Raschke. You want to root for the Gagnes. You want to root for well, everybody rooted for the Road Warriors, but
yeah, there was that first tweener.
Yeah.
Well, Flair was a tweener too back then too, before he joined the Horsemen, because it was like he wasn't necessarily a bad guy, he wasn't necessarily a good guy. Because remember, Magnum TA and Dusty used to help him out back then. Matter of fact, that's part of what made the Horsemen come together, you know.
Yeah.
Tully Blanchard.
When Dusty helped him out in that cage match against, in my opinion, the greatest Russian that wasn't a Russian, Nikita Koloff.
Just so I stop.
You're going down. I'll never forget when he sickled David Crockett for calling him a liar.
Yeah.
I've never seen an announcer go down so fast in my life.
Well, David Crockett kind of asked for it, because remember, he kept getting in his face too, because he not only he was telling him, like, you know, how wrong he was, but then he was like grabbing him and everything else. And then I guess that last time he put his hand on him, it was like, all right, that's it. I'm gonna sickle this MF right now, you know.
And I didn't know at that time that Uncle Ivan had been the one to beat Bruno to end that 7.5-year title reign that he had.
Right. Well, yeah, because Bruno had 2 different title reigns. Because was it that one, or was it the 12-year run that he ended? I thought it was the 12-year run. And then
no, they like to say it's 12 years, but they never say it's combined. The 7.5-year run was ended by Ivan. Then he had a 4-year run.
Okay, so he wasn't champion for 11 years and then lost, and then he went on to
right.
Okay, all right. Because see, I wasn't sure about that, so you know, I mean, my history is good, but it ain't that good. But
the only reason I found out that Uncle Ivan was the one that did that was because of my grandmother. That's why she hated the Russians so much.
Now,
even when Nikita turned face because of Magnum's accident, she still couldn't stand that man.
When you talked about Dusty Rhodes and the parking lot incident that everybody talks about, when Dusty had injured Tully, because I guess, was this before he beat Ric Flair for the 3rd time, or was this after?
This was right before he beat Rick for the 3rd time.
Okay, because I remember him coming off the top rope, just doing all of this stuff to Tully's knee and so forth. But getting into the incident itself, your grandmother's reaction to it was the same as my dad, because my dad was like, he didn't call the police or nothing like that. I remember he was looking at Dad and this drunk and stupid, what the fuck are they doing? You know, it's like, that's you know, this ain't wrestling, you know, it's like, you know, it's a crime they committed and all of this other stuff. And
that's how the old folks thought about it. It was a crime.
Yeah, because my grandfather, my mother's father, he was into wrestling too. Of course, him and my dad didn't like each other for many different reasons we're not going to talk about on the show. But it was like, he got so mad too, and both of them on different television screens, like yelling at the damn screen, like, what the fuck is going on here? You know? And it was hilarious to me. And I just remember looking at that like, man, it just feels like a mob hit, you know?
Yeah.
Because if you watch the Godfather movies and stuff like that, I mean, it was like the perfect setup. And it was just funny, the lead up to it. Tully Blanchard telling the cameraman, you just do your job. I'm paying you such and such. And J.J. Dillon saying the same thing to this guy. And they just rolling up with them.
Follow. He's turning it. Follow him. Turning it.
I mean, that was awesome. Matter of fact, Arn was in one car ahead of them, right?
Yep, he was, because you had the cameraman Tully and JJ in the one car, and Arn was following them.
and I'm referring to Arn Anderson, people. So he was following Dusty in his convertible, and Tully
That was
and
a nice convertible that
JJ.
Dusty had too.
I
That was
didn't
a
hear you,
nice convertible.
because I mean, years later, everybody talked about the convertibles that Dusty used to drive and so forth, and it that whole thing was done so well that it was like that was an awesome angle that they did.
That was one of the first times that I can remember where wrestling blurred reality.
Exactly.
And you don't
Now,
get that a lot nowadays.
exactly. So then, okay, let me ask you this. Did you ever at some point think that it was fake, what you was watching with wrestling, or did you always believe it was real up until something else happened?
The only time the when I realized it was fake was, I want to say it was around 1987 or 88 at a show at the Cap Center. And it was a WWF show. And I seen how they would do the Hollywood punches. And I'm like, oh wow, this really ain't real. Because I didn't understand blading at the time. I didn't get what blading was. I thought they were actually busting them open. But even finding out that it was fake, it didn't deter how I felt about it.
Yeah, because it had the action, it had the drama,
I used to tell people, and I still tell people to this day, that deride me for still watching it 44 years later. It's a male soap opera with gratuitous violence.
Yeah. And see, here's the thing too. Saying fake is not saying that what they do in that ring is fake, because I mean they're taking punches, they're doing moves, and it's just the reaction to everything is fake. And I think two things kind of made me think, all right, what the hell is going on here? One incident that I saw live, but then in retrospect, when they replayed it years later, Bruno Sammartino and Larry Zbyszko, when they first had their feud.
That chair shot.
The chair shot, and then you saw Bruno go into his tights and kind of did that on the floor, and I was like,
that's a perfect example of blading.
But then the second thing that a lot of people may not talk about, that I always thought was kind of a bit on the fake side, was the Irish whip. I never understood when you threw somebody to the ropes and they bounce back. Okay, you getting your ass whooped. How are you going to bounce back off of the ropes and run into anything that person's doing?
Because your first reaction is go back at them.
Or not even go to the ropes at all. If somebody's picking you up and they're going to throw you out the window, are you going to go out the window? You're going to be fighting, to stop everything going out the window. And that's what I used to think of back then, because I was like, well, why are they bouncing back off the ropes if they get their ass whooped? Because, they get it up there all rubbery legged and all of this other stuff. So you would imagine that they wouldn't have the wherewithal to be able to run. And that made me start questioning the stuff a little bit too, because I never understood the Irish whip. But it looks good in television form and match fluidity. But if you really think about it in practice, if you're in a real fight, one, it's not going to last that long. And two, you're not going to go back and forth on the ropes, especially if you're getting your ass kicked the whole time.
That and laying there and allowing somebody to jump on you from the top rope.
And what's funny about that, now that you mentioned that, think about the Ultimate Warrior and Honky Tonk Man. Remember that, like,
whose shirt I am sporting right now too, by the way. Greatest Intercontinental champion of all time.
And I didn't even notice that until you just did that. So you think about that match, okay? When he got hit with the spear and he laid on the mat, you could see him turning to see where the Warrior was.
Yep.
Those little stuff like that kind of made me say, okay, something's going on here. But
It's the subtlety of it. It's those subtle little moments.
And you really have to be on it to pay attention to it to see it happening. And you know, it didn't bother me as much. And my dad didn't notice any of that stuff. It was just like back then when we was growing up in the 70s, 80s, it was black and white. You were either a good guy or you're a bad guy. There was none of this tweener stuff like an Austin, even though they had some tweeners back then. It was like there was a stark line between good guys and bad guys.
Like you said, I think the one of the first tweeners that got over as good guys more so than being a bad guy was the Road Warriors.
Yeah.
Because even when Crockett and them tried to turn the Road Warriors bad, people didn't want to cheer. People did not want to boo them.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's why they kind of left them as they were. And they never had a long enough heel run. Because, you think about it, when they left AWA, because I think they were heels in AWA, every other place they went to, they were either full-on good guys or kind of in between. Even when Dusty tried to turn them heel in '88, nobody really,
And I thoroughly enjoyed watching that spike get dug right above Dusty's eye. It was one of the greatest. There's certain moments in wrestling where you remember like where you were and what you were doing when you saw that. And I'm thinking to myself, when Dusty ran down there and attacked Animal, dude, you stupid. Hawk and Paul Ellering right there.
True. Well, let me ask you this. That's a good transition point. What incident over the years in wrestling, give me like 3 to 5 incidents that you clearly remember that you was like, wow, that you was like blown away by, good or bad?
My number one is Shawn Michaels turning on Marty Jannetty and throwing him through the barbershop window.
Did you think it wasn't going to happen, or you just was shocked that you saw it?
I knew Shawn was going to turn on him. I could see it coming because it had been coming for weeks. But the throwing him through the barbershop window, I never expected. I never expected that.
And Heenan was good on that commentary, too. Oh, he was going through the window to try to escape,
He's trying to get away from him.
What's another one you got?
Savage turning on Hogan to me was long overdue. Because I love, God rest his soul, I love the Macho Man Randy Savage. Good or bad, I never found anybody more charismatic in wrestling than him. You listen to every word he says in a promo. This man took a creamer and turned it into a whole promo.
Yeah.
He took a newspaper and turned it into a promo. Cheeto Santana, ooh, yeah. You know what this is? This is yesterday's newspaper. Just like you. Yesterday's news. Ooh, yeah. And folks say he was coked up and all that every time he did his interviews.
But it worked.
It worked.
Yeah.
Honky Tonk Man bashing Jake the Snake on the Snake Pit with that guitar. Never saw that coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sadly, that would turn Jake to pain meds and all, but that's another story.
Legend. I mean, because I think it was more to that story than just that. But
yeah, I think he was on a little bit more than that just before that happened.
I mean, you think about it. I mean, when I saw that guitar shot in retrospect, I'm like, it really catch him that hard. You know what I'm saying? I mean, do that.
It was a non-gimmick guitar.
Right. I get it. Oh, trust me, I get it. I mean, but holding those guitars, like, okay, he kind of saw it and didn't see it. I kind of question that Snuka shot, and I hope I'm not stealing your thunder here. I mean, that was a different story.
That was on my list. I hate to this day. I'm sorry he's dead. Yeah. God rest his soul. But I hated Snuka. Everything about Snuka just made my skin crawl. I never understood his promos. And the light shines and the water falls. Then you will find out I am the Superfly. What the hell are you talking about? You got to fight Roddy Piper.
Even he said years later that, the fans didn't know what I was talking about and all of this other stuff. I mean, it kind of was what it was with Snuka. I'm not going to say I was a huge fan of his because I think he was just one of the few high flyers that got over back then because wrestling then was such a ground game, ground and pound, and you got this guy jumping off of everything. Well, him and Macho Man, and
yep.
It was kind of weird. I don't ever remember those two wrestling each other. And I remember they were actually there in the same promotions a couple of times. You thought that would be a natural.
I don't think they ever did.
That would have been a good feud that, just to see what they would do to each other. They never wrestled each other. I don't remember.
A great feud over the IC title.
You think so?
That could have. Look at what he did with Bronco.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you would have thought that would have been a natural progression, but obviously we're talking about stuff that's like 30 or 40 years old here. I don't know the timeline of when Snuka came in and when Savage, came up, but I would have thought that would have been a perfect feud between those two because neither one of them you would understand anything that they're talking about. But at the same time, it would have been so much action between the two. And to go for that IC title, that may have been a feud that that
it could have been a moneymaker. It really could have been a moneymaker. Yeah. Now, what are some of the incidents that you remember?
I'm gonna bring up one that is kind of interesting. So think about this with Roddy Piper when he turned babyface in the WWF.
Okay.
I completely missed, for whatever reason, or didn't remember that he showed up at the flower shop before that. Mind you, I'm watching wrestling, and his first match was AJ Petrucci when he came back, and I'm looking like, what the fuck is everybody cheering for him for, And I mean, they were loud. I was like, did he do something earlier that I completely missed because I didn't understand it? I was like, and I knew he was gone for, what was it, like 6 months or whatever. I was like, I'm glad to see him back, but why are they cheering for him? And then when he said after the match, when Sheik, Volkov, Hercules, Slick, Blassie were all on the flower shop, and he went over there and said, Slick, you got lips like bicycle pedals and all of this. I was like, okay, what the hell did I miss here? And it wasn't until I saw a replay of him showing up at the flower shop asking for his show back that I realized that's why he turned.
Yeah.
The story.
Yeah, he didn't have his interview spot.
He didn't have his interview spot, and then he took Bob Orton as his, and called him AC and all of this. I mean, it's like you watch that now, and they can never get away with some of that stuff then that they do now. I mean, think about how the Me Too movement and everybody else would be so on to Piper.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
He said everything but calling him the F word, And
yep.
I mean, it was like, he was like, this is trash. And, I don't want my kids seeing this. I mean, if you didn't know Piper, you could like, yeah, he was married and had kids or whatever, And that was something that got me like, wow, And when Piper and Hogan first teamed up, Okay, that
That
was
was a scary moment for me.
actually pretty funny because I think they had a tag team match with Paul Orndorff and Harley Race.
Yep.
And every time they tagged each other, it was like they looked at each other,
It looked like you didn't know if it was going to be a slap or a tag.
and then when they bumped into each other, they like going against each other. And then all of a sudden, the heels would try to attack them, and then they would jump on the heels and stuff like that. They worked that pretty good, you know. And they always had this little animosity towards each other, like, I can't believe I'm in this ring with this motherfucker or whatever, but we got to take care of business or whatever. And another incident that I can think of, when the Undertaker turned good the first time, I didn't understand that. I never. That's
I
something.
never understood that, and to this day, I don't understand that.
Yeah, I mean, I knew they weren't necessarily booing the Undertaker, but they weren't necessarily cheering for him either. They didn't know how to react to him.
They were scared of him. You saw the little kids' faces.
And I don't know if they did, if WWF kind of connected James Bond into this, and follow me here. Remember the big guy that had, I think his name was Jaws, the one that had
Richard Keel. Richard Keel, I remember him.
And I want to say that they kind of tied those two stories together because I think a fan had wrote in to whoever produced all of the Bond films, like, why can't he be a nice guy or whatever? And remember, in one of those Bond films, he actually, quote unquote, turned babyface and started helping James Bond.
Yeah, the second one that he was in.
Yeah.
Because he fell in love with the little farm girl or whatever.
Right. So it's like, that's the only thing that I can think of that made the Undertaker turn. And what made it even more weird was that funeral parlor segment. And you hear Paul Bearer, oh, the lovely Elizabeth. And he was like talking like, I was like, is he attracted to Elizabeth? And that's why he turned? You know what I'm saying? I think, like everybody else, you try to figure out what the hell is going on here. You know? I don't know what.
I completely forgot about that one. And because I remember they were getting ready to walk through the curtain, and Liz was going to be the one to walk through the curtain.
Right.
So she'd have took that chair shot.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think Jake got hit with that chair. So it was like, it was just funny. Some of the stuff that WWF did back then, I like the subtleties to some of the turns. Because you talked about Savage and Hogan. You think about it. That Mega Powers, Mega Bucks matchup that started the turn. Hogan, know.
What started the turn was the match against the Honky Tonk Man on Saturday Night's Main Event. That's what started the turn. Because the Hart Foundation and Honky jumped Macho Man.
Right, but that's when Savage turned. Well, he was already a babyface at this point because Honky talked all this trash about him. That kind of solidified the face turn. But I'm talking about the heel turn for Macho and going back the other way.
At the end of the match when Hogan put Liz on Macho's shoulder and kind of sort of had his hand
exactly
in the area where he shouldn't have had it.
Macho Man had this look like, the fuck are you doing with my girl, you know? And they didn't build on it then, but it was just a subtle turn, kind of like with Andre.
That's what I like that they did back then that they don't well, especially Vince McMahon doesn't do now. There are no like long-term storylines.
Right.
Stuff like that is what builds the anticipation and the excitement. That's what gets you to come back and watch the next week because you want to see what's gonna happen. Now it's just all over the place every week.
All right. So then, since we transition in there, what do you think caused that? Is it what Jim Cornette says all the time about Vince Russo, or what you think caused that to start going into the direction where everything just happens in that week and you're in the moment?
The fact that Vince McMahon bought out all his competition.
Just as simple as that.
And that's it. When you have no competition, you become lackadaisical, you become complacent. There's nobody else for you to compete against. Now,
Right.
what I noticed is that since he does have legitimate competition now, because nobody ever counted TNA as competition. Nobody ever counted Ring of Honor as competition. But
Right.
now that he has AEW nipping at his heels, you're kind of sort of getting these storylines coming back.
Okay. So then let's ask the question: what killed wrestling?
Vince buying the competition.
That alone.
That alone. And the sad thing is, he started it when he bought the company after promising his father that he would not go against the other regional territories. And then he went into every regional territory and plucked everybody that he wanted. Roddy Piper from Portland, Valentine from the NWA. He just went everywhere. The only place he didn't really pluck anybody from at that time was World Class. That's because everybody was so loyal to Fritz, they wasn't going to leave. He plucked Bobby Heenan and Hulk Hogan from the AWA. Agent Adonis came from the AWA. He just plucked people from everywhere in order to build the WWF. Mm-hmm. Once he had done that, and the territories died, and the only competition he had was WCW, it was all about the long game. It wasn't a sprint, it was a marathon. And he won the marathon.
Right.
That killed wrestling.
To win the marathon when you own the race. So, I mean,
Jim Crockett was going into the pay-per-view market for the very first time with Starrcade 87.
Right.
Vince McMahon told all the pay-per-view markets that if you want WrestleMania 4, you can't show Starrcade 87.
Right.
As a result of that, only 20% of the pay-per-view market showed Starrcade 87.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm all for being a businessman, but to be that cutthroat, wow.
I think what killed wrestling, in my opinion, was the lack of wrestling. I think they were too much into the story, not enough into the match. And you saw that a lot with the WrestleManias back then. I mean, I think the first WrestleMania, they focused on one particular match, obviously main event, but you had all these stars that had nothing to do with what was going on. And I understand you got to have some star power that had a crossover appeal, but there's a way to work it. And I'll tell you, one that they worked well, even though it was later on, Pete Rose. I enjoyed seeing him go out there and get a tombstone by Kane and so forth. Because
3 weeks in a row.
I mean, it was funny and it made sense how they did it.
Yeah.
That I could get with. You know what I'm saying? But some of the other stuff, it was like you got Liberace in the ring and you got Bob Uecker. He was good. I'm not gonna lie. He was good with some of the banter that he had back and forth with Andre and so forth.
I remember Andre choking him out backstage.
Exactly. I mean, I think, what was that, WrestleMania 2 there? Susan St. James
on commentary.
Yeah.
And he didn't know what the hell was going on.
And I mean, it's like, if you're going to bring somebody outside of wrestling into the fold, at least, you know, get them trained up on what the hell they're watching a little bit so they can act like they know what they're talking about or whatever.
Or get somebody that is a fan, that you know is a fan of the sport.
Right. You know, and I thought that hurt it a lot. And then Crockett did the same thing, but they went more into the music realm. Because that's
the Oak Ridge Country Boys having a concert.
Yeah, because it was like, you know, okay, how many of these people are actually showing up for the concert versus how many people are actually showing up for the wrestling match. And it was a different dynamic. I get that because you got a Southern promotion versus Northeast / national promotion. But some of that stuff just didn't work back then.
Crockett going outside of his region too was not a good idea.
Yeah.
You run from Georgia to Baltimore. That's your region.
Yeah.
Going to Chicago and going to California and going up to, I remember they ran the Bunkhouse Stampede in like Long Island, New York. That's not your market.
Right. Yeah.
I understand you want to compete, but if you keep it in your market, you'll be better off.
True.
Vince is the only one that can go everywhere.
Well, a lot of it too is demand. I mean, even though, back then we didn't know what the hell was going on, but obviously being grown up and seeing how business works and stuff like that, you can relate back to the time like, okay, Vince McMahon saw the market saying, hey, somebody in San Francisco wants you to come out here and do a promotion. Whereas Crockett, well, let's go to Chicago and see what we can do. That's the difference. It's like you forcing yourself into a market versus the market telling you to come here,
Yeah.
And that's where Crockett Promotions fell apart. But I tell you, one person, if they had gotten national television, that probably would have kicked both of their asses to me was Bill Watts. Because, I mean, the way he ran Mid-South UWF, that was like, man, you could have, they came on with people beating the shit out of each other. You hear that Stanley Clark music playing with the guitar and so forth, and then they right into it. Jim Ross.
Jim Ross was the best announcer, bar none. Still to this day, probably is the best announcer in wrestling. But he cut his teeth right there with Bill Watts.
Oh yeah, and I mean, and it was believable. I mean, because when that Mid-South at UWF was on, I mean, I didn't care what was going on in the NWA or WWF. That was it to me,
They had another great turn in that company, Terry Taylor.
That was funny.
Nobody saw that. Nobody saw that coming.
No, nobody saw it coming, but I like the way he did it.
Because he was the white meat baby face.
Yeah.
He can't be a heel. He's smart, he's intelligent, and he's good looking. Oh no, he can't be a heel.
Uh-huh.
Oh, he missed his plane.
Yeah, missed his plane, quote unquote. And then he came in there with that briefcase and saved Chris Adams in that match. Who were they going against? I forgot.
She was singing Rick Steiner.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because
hot stuff in Hyatt International.
I know that. I mean, it was like that was just so funny watching Terry Taylor morph into this ultra heel, and he was actually very good in that role. I mean,
he was.
Now,
I think that he might have been their best heel that they had, who wasn't a champion in that company. Well, no, because he was the TV champion by the time it ended.
Yeah,
by the time they morphed with WCW, he was the TV champion.
Well, didn't he win the TV title as a babyface? Didn't he beat Hollywood John Tatum? I thought he beat Hollywood John Tatum for it. He might have lost it back to him, but
I think he did lose it back to him. No, he had lost it to
Buddy Jack Roberts. I remember. Yeah, I remember he lost it to a Freebird. I was like, it's like coming back to me a little bit. Yeah, of course, folks. Yes, before y'all even comment on it. Yeah, I did a lot of research before I did this shit. But
for some odd reason, I don't have to do research. My brain, like my sister has told me since I was about 19 years old, I'm a walking, talking, living, breathing wrestling encyclopedia.
And see, this guy here, folks, I mean, he lived, breathed wrestling for virtually all of his life. I mean, if nothing else he wanted to get into was wrestling, I think he would have been a good manager because he had all of that energy, all of that spunk and so forth. And it's just funny how he would relate his life to wrestling.
To this day, I hate Rey Mysterio because he did what I couldn't do.
With high flying stuff and so forth.
I mean, the man is my size and my height, and he's a god darn legend.
Yeah, I mean, well, what about modern wrestling is good?
AEW.
And why is that?
Because Tony Khan is a fan of wrestling. He is a true old school fan of the sport. Not only does he give the fans what we want in terms of the matches, in terms of the storylines, in terms of the feuds, he understands what we want to see. It's not a lot of talking. Yes, you do have your promos, but you get ass kicking for 2 hours every Wednesday night,
right?
And an hour on Friday night. And their pay-per-views, I have yet to go to one live. I've gone to a watch party for their very first one live, but I have yet to get to one of their pay-per-views live. I went to their very first show that was here in DC at Capital One Arena in October of 2019. One of the best shows I've ever seen. And everybody says that, oh, if you're an ex-WWE star, you just pop on over to AEW, you're going to get paid. It's not the fact that you're going to get paid. You're going to get used and used correctly.
Okay.
Chris Jericho has reinvented himself more times than I can count in wrestling.
He's like wrestling basically.
I watched him his entire career.
Right.
This man has morphed into so many different characters, and you just are amazed every time he does it.
Right.
CM Punk, who I regard as, well, after this past Sunday, he's the second greatest wrestler wrestling right now. He's there. He came over, put over the biggest heel that they have in the company by actually losing to him.
Okay.
MJF is me with a little bit more muscle. Because the way he talks on the mic is exactly how he lives. He's this day's version of Roddy Piper. He's a heel.
Okay.
He lives his gimmick. He even insults his own parents.
You know what's funny about Roddy Piper to me? He really wasn't a heel that long. If you really look at his whole career, he probably was a heel for like less than 3 years.
You know what? You're right. Because even in the NWA, in the NWA, he was a babyface.
Yeah.
Most of the time. In Portland, he became a babyface to defend, I forget who the announcer was,
Gordon
but that was his best friend.
Well, it wasn't Gordon Soley, was it?
No, it wasn't Soley. I forget who the announcer was in Portland, but he came to his defense, and that made him a babyface there. It wasn't until he got with Vince that he really became that heel that you hated.
Yeah, and it wasn't even that long. I mean, that's the part that makes it so funny because he got there, what was it, 84?
Yeah.
And I want to say.
And by late 86, he was a babyface.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of hard to go against him. Great talker. Did everything off the cuff. I don't even think he took the time to like, okay, this is the promo that I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to. I just think he just did everything off the cuff.
Oh, he admitted that. He admitted that on his DVD that he never had nobody writing his promos. Everything he said just came out of here like that.
I mean, to me, Bobby Heenan, Jim Cornette, Roddy Piper, Jerry Lawler, and I may be missing a couple. I just felt like they could just go out there and just say whatever they want, you know, especially as heels. That it's like, wow.
Flair too.
Yeah. And Flair, he always had this thing where it was like, God, but I wish I could be him right now. I mean, it wasn't like you hated him, you know, you hated the stuff that he did, but you loved the stuff that he said and how he came off. Tully Blanchard was the one that made the Four Horsemen hate it, because it's like Tully would come out there and he'll say some stuff and he would do some stuff and he just had this look like, you
He
know,
was a smug little. If you hated him, you just wanted to punch him right in the mouth.
right. And Arn Anderson would say something profound where it's like, you know, that's actually true. And Ole Anderson, he came off like, you know, he's really a badass here. You know what I'm saying? Tully Blanchard kind of made them heels more so than anything else. And people had a lot of respect for J.J. Dillon on the mic too, because he came off like that boss or that grandfatherly type or whatever.
Businessman.
Yeah. And it was like, you know, you even had fans out there wearing suits and doing the Four Horsemen sign and all of that.
I did it when I would go. My grandmother knew if I'm leaving out the house on a Friday night around 7 o'clock, dressed in a two-piece suit and sunglasses. Oh, he going to see NWA wrestling at Stadium Armory.
Let me ask you this: what angles do you think over time, any promotion that was missed, that they could have lit the wrestling world on fire had they just went with it, even if they never did anything with it?
Sting and Undertaker. That's the biggest one to me.
Yeah, that's like the most recent one. It was like, why didn't you just do this match? You know what I'm saying?
Had them both there at the same time. I mean, granted, Taker was a little bit older in years, but so was Sting. You could have had that match. That to me is the biggest missed opportunity.
As silly as it may sound, I'm gonna put Sting in another scenario. Him and Warrior, I felt like they could have had burnt the house down with that, you know.
And they actually were in WCW at one time together.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, because one of them could have turned heel and they would have lit the house on fire with that, you know. I'm trying to think of another one that it was just on my mind. I was like, you know, when Bob Backlund came a heel,
that was a great moment.
Nobody knew what the hell he was going to do, you know. Because Bob Backlund, let's be honest with you, after probably his second year being the champion, it just got old. I mean, yeah, everybody knew he could wrestle. Everybody knew he can, you know, get out of every move and stuff like that. But then, I'm doing it for you people. It's all about this, and you know, I'm going to represent you. It got old. But then when he went into that craze moment, I got this title, I'm going to do this, and I'm sick and tired of you people out there, you plebeians, not following the right way. I'm going to homogenize you. I'm going to make you into what society once was. You know, when he started going into that crazy Backlund thing, I was like, where the hell was this? And you know how much money he could have made had people actually been there at that time? Because I think that was the period where they had their second golden age, and a lot of those stars left. I think because of the steroid scandal or whatever. Yep. And then they brought him back in, and then they was transitioning to Bret Hart being the champion and so forth, just before Austin got there and so forth. It's like if he had some competition to use that with, that would have been awesome to me. And I just think that was a kind of a missed opportunity, not really because of who was there. It was just time. It was just like he didn't really have nobody to go against.
No, other than Bret, he didn't have anybody.
Yeah, because it just seemed to me like, man, Bob Backlund could have done that for like 5 years and stayed on top for a while. I think they rushed Diesel into the title.
Definitely.
And he didn't really have nobody to go against.
I mean, for God's sakes, one of the main events with him as world champion was him versus Mabel. Why?
Who was there? I mean, you know, let's really think about some of this stuff, man. Oh, here's a good one. This is the original one that I was thinking. Larry Zbyszko as the WWF champion. That was an opportunity there.
Because that would have been good.
He got out of that feud with Bruno. I think he was about to leave, and Backlund obviously was the champion at this point. They could have put that title on Zbyszko there, and him and Backlund could have went back and forth.
Even if you only give it to him for a 3 to 6 month reign, still that'd have been money.
Yeah, I mean, because Zbyszko won it in the AWA, but nobody was really watching AWA at that point. I don't think they was on the downside of everything, and they had to turn Bockwinkel babyface and all of this other stuff. But I really think if WWF at that time, we're talking what, 80, 81-ish or something like that, if they'd have put that title on Zbyszko, I mean, we might be talking a different story back then, you know? I mean, I thought he was that good. And ironically, on another TV set of mine, Zbyszko was on the television talking about it. It's funny how life does that.
The living legend, man. The living legend.
Yeah. I mean, and plus, if you think about it, with Bruno and so forth, see, that would have solidified Bruno a lot more, knowing that Larry became a world champion there too.
Yeah.
And he did it his way, because I remember when Zbyszko was a good guy and he teamed up with Tony Garea and they were the world tag team champions. This is one of the matches that I remember. And he lost the title to the Valiant Brothers because he was the one that got pinned in that match. And I think
match.
It was kind of the same way that Chris Jericho turned into a bad guy in the WCW.
Oh, start the whining little.
Yeah, because I just can't get this right. Like, he started going through this, and he needed something to build his career back up. And he was like, I remember Zbyszko was doing all these promos. He wanted to wrestle Bruno to prove that he, belonged in wrestling. I mean, the way he did it was almost a noble way of doing it, but nobody knew that he was going to just lose his mind, take the chair, and do what he did. And Bruno, of course, with the fake blade and out there that everybody saw. But, I thought him being a world champion in WWF was a missed opportunity there.
I think another missed opportunity that Vince missed was putting the world title on Scott Hall, on Razor Ramon.
That could have worked, yeah.
Because as over as he was, I would have put the belt on him before I would have put it on Kevin Nash.
Yeah, because Vince had this affinity for these big, superhero-like people.
The bigger you are, oh, yes, I see money with you.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's what kind of messed up WWF, because you think about it, as a fan, you gravitated towards the NWA. I mean, a real wrestling fan would get into like NWA, to a lesser extent World Class, because it was too Von Erich heavy, but their dad owned the promotion.
You know why that is.
Mid-South, a lot lesser extent AWA, because I just felt like it was for like old drunks that just went in there and they said, I just want to see somebody get their ass whooped tonight or whatever.
Crushing loser pains.
But the thing was, you could relate to them, and it made you think, okay, if I trained hard enough, I could actually get into Jim Crockett Promotions. I could actually work there, WWF. If I'm not a bodybuilder, I don't stand a chance going over there.
You'll
You
be
know,
a jailer for the rest of your life.
I mean, it's like that's what I felt that was wrong. And another missed opportunity. I thought um, Rick Rude and Raging Bull staying together as a tag team.
Yes. Yes.
I that was a. I think they were highly underrated as a tag team. I think I don't know how they would have kept that going because obviously Rude left to go to the WWF and then Manny Fernandez fell off the face of the earth after that. But it was kind of like if they could have took that team and put it in the Heenan family, but then you think about it, how would, and this might be leading into another what if, you think about the Horsemen being there all at the same time.
That'd
How
have been interesting.
they
Paul
have
Jones's family versus the Horsemen.
that's a whole different angle than where I was going at. But yeah, that could have worked too. Because I was thinking like, you could have had the Horsemen there running amok with those WWF superstars like they did in the NWA. Because I mean, one thing that I learned over the years, they never copyrighted anything. You know, they
Yeah.
could have taken the Horsemen as they were, take it over there and made it work.
Arn just got the copyright for the Four Horsemen about 3 or 4 days ago, ironically.
Really?
Yep. Because they're now coming out with Four Horsemen t-shirts that are Arn owns the copyright for this.
But and I think that was another thing with Crockett Promotions that took them down too, was not doing marketing well. I mean, they had so many good things that came out of that they never followed up on, you know?
Yep.
And you think about WWF, I kind of feel like it was the other way. They over marketed some of the stuff. And I'm going to use a couple of examples here. Dusty Rhodes and Hulk Hogan. I think after a while, people just got tired of seeing them beat up everybody. And don't get me wrong, Dusty Rhodes, all-time legend, stuff like that, but it started getting old. And I think what really turned me off of Dusty back then is when he beat Lex Luger for the U.S. title. I was like, get the fuck out of here. I mean, that was just one of those moments where I looked at like, all right, this is bullshit. You know what? That's another good segment. What is a moment that you looked at in wrestling where you was like, all right, this is total bullshit what I just saw here? There's several of those.
Speaking on that one right there, Dusty has, and I think it's still called this to this day, because of the way his booking style, a Dusty finish.
Yeah.
Where it looks like you won the title, but either you get disqualified,
mm-hmm.
or there was a count out you didn't see.
mm-hmm.
Those type of finishes, I can't stand anymore. I understood them back then, but they started to do them so much, especially with Dusty, that it was like, why? Why are you doing this?
Mm-hmm.
David Arquette winning the WCW World Title.
Oh God, that was a hot flaming piece of trash there, but
I equate that with Vince McMahon winning the WWF World Title.
That was, I mean, that wasn't as bad as Arquette because I mean I could.
Those are my two biggest though. Those are my two biggest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Arquette, I'm thinking David Arquette won. Book me in a match with him. I'll beat his ass.
Another one that wasn't match specific, but it was just the idea of it. Sapphire turning on Dusty. I just thought, I was like, what the fuck for? You know what I'm saying? Like, really?
Just like why? What?
I mean, she would have no significance with Ted DiBiase whatsoever. What is he gonna do? Like, stand in front of promo and.
And that's a storyline that would not work in this society now. First off,
Oh yeah.
Virgil was your slave, and you just went out and bought an old black woman.
Yeah.
Oh hell no!
I think that part of it, yeah, that's true. Because if he's already doing everything at his beck and call, now you got a sister over there at the same time doing, older sister like that too. That I can hear Aunt Jemima references and all. And I'm not trying to racial on it, but I mean that's what it looks like. And think about that angle when Ted DiBiase was leading up to who was going to be a slave or whatever. Hercules was standing there. I mean, you kind of thought that's what he was going to do for Virgil at first, but then it was hurt. If they had black guys, another black guy that they would have said that would have been my slave, they would have got television back then.
Yeah, they definitely would have. Piper painting half his damn body black against Bad News Brown.
That made no sense to me at all. I mean, I get that I hated a brother out there, but then what was the point of the paint and the Michael Jackson thing, all other stuff in the ring?
Funny thing about that paint, that shit didn't come off for 2 days.
Why was that?
Apparently, whoever he sent to go get the paint, it was supposed to be washable or whatever. They got the wrong kind. So his ass had to go get on the plane.
I heard a story about that. Didn't Trader John and Arnold Skolin or somebody had hid the stuff that actually took stuff off of it? Yeah. I'm trying to think. Andre the Giant, that was another one where I felt like that was somewhat of a mistake. And I'm going to tell you in a different way. They should have somehow put the belt on him before WrestleMania 3. And I'm going to tell you why. Because when Hogan actually beat him, it was like, who the fuck can beat him now? You know what I'm saying? Because it's like if you beat Andre, you just took all of the steam out of anybody else that could have went for the title. I mean, they should have had Orndorff win some sort of title back then. It was the world title or the Intercontinental title, whatever. That would have legitimized him more.
I firmly believe Orndorff should have been the one to beat Hogan for the belt in like '86.
Well, hell, remember that cage where they theoretically could have put the belt on Orndorff there because he really was on the ring before Hogan.
He did. He touched the floor first. And I still remember that because they kept showing the replay. And every time they showed it, I'm thinking, y'all stupid. Orndorff won.
I mean, and I think that's a BS / missed opportunity there too with Orndorff. Because, I mean, he could have been the world champion. And also, they didn't know what to do with him. I mean, because he was a good guy here, then he was a bad guy there, then he was a good guy again. Like, they didn't know what to do with him.
They flip-flopped him just like they kept doing the Big Show.
Yeah, because I just feel like if you keep turning somebody over and over again, you really don't know what the hell to do, you know?
Yep.
Wow. I mean, we done went like an hour and 15 minutes, and, we got our little origin story going, and then on top of all of that, we went at these angles, and so I think we went a lot further than we thought.
This was good. I like this.
We're going to definitely do some more episodes for wrestling, and we're going to tailor everything a lot more to specific time angles and so forth. I think the people would want to hear some of our perspectives and stuff, and
I think the next episode we should focus on tag teams.
That'll be very, some established ones that they probably should put together.
Yeah,
we'll do that. That'll be episode 2. We'll talk about some tag teams.
All right, then, folks. From the greatest Intercontinental Champion to another great Intercontinental Champion.
We did it.
Thank you for watching us.
We'll be back.
And we'll see you next week.
Yes, sir. Let's do this.
Ooh, yeah.
Ooh, yeah. Dig it. All right, I stopped the recording.